Okay, good morning everybody. My name is Iain Collins. When I was asked to do this talk, I thought I would talk about the meaning of life. And then I received this email from TEDx. And I thought, what does X mean? And it goes on to talk about the power of X. What is the power of X? So I thought, should I talk about the meaning of life, the power of X? The meaning of life, the letter X. Obviously, the letter X is what you all want to hear about. Now, I'm going to begin a bit with the history of the letter X. It is the 24th letter of the English alphabet. Now, this letter comes from the Latin, which comes from the Greek, which somewhat comes from the Phoenician. We see that the Phoenicians did have an X-shaped letter, and this was known as the Tor. You may have heard of the Tor from the Old Testament. It was the mark that people daubed on their foreheads or on their doorposts to avoid being smitten by the angel of death. Now the Greeks borrowed this letter, they changed it a little bit, stood it up, and it became their Taf, and it became our T. So X became T. That doesn't really help us very much. But the Greeks borrowed other letters from the Phoenicians. One of these was the Samek, which was sound S in Phoenician. The Greeks borrowed it and changed its form a little bit, and they made it into Xi. And they used it for words like xeno and xylo, meaning foreign and wood, which are words we use in English today, and we'll come back to those later. Now, Greek did actually have an X-shaped letter, but this was pronounced hi, as in characteres, which means character. So the Greeks had the sound X, as in box, and they had a letter X, but they weren't the same thing. And so the letter that we use today doesn't really come from ancient Greek that the Greeks used in Athens. But on the west side of Greece, fortunately, they did use this letter, and they did have the X sound. And this was the letter that the Greeks took with them to parts of Italy when they colonized parts of that country. And this is the letter that the Etruscans adopted. And this is the letter that went to Rome and became part of the Latin language. Now, the fact that Greeks used the same letter and it had different sounds should not be a surprise to us, because in our own language, X can be pronounced Xi as in excite, or Ksha as in luxury. Sometimes it's silent as in Sioux Indian. Now you'll say that Sioux is a foreign word, but then we're talking all about foreign words, the transfer of words and letters between languages. We also pronounce this letter as a Z in xylophone and xenophobia. Now these are Greek words, those two words we mentioned earlier, xylo and xeno, at the beginning of these words. So in Greek, they're written with a x. In English, we write them with an X, but we pronounce them with a Z. So as you see, the origins and the sounds of the letter X are a little bit mysterious, a little bit unknown. Now today, we use X in phrases and terms like X chromosome and X-ray, so called because the discoverers of these items didn't actually realize what they had discovered. Even though, if you look at the X chromosome, X does fit it somewhat. Malcolm Little, he was a political activist. Little, not a very strong name. He changed his name to Malcolm X. The X signified that his American name was unknown. His African name was unknown. And then we have the ubiquitous X factor. The X factor is the factor that makes a star, the unknown factor. And this term actually comes from the military. When they determined the salary of a soldier, the X factor was the likelihood of that soldier being killed or dying. not on stage, but in action. So, how did X come to signify the unknown? Now, there was a recent TED talk by Terry Moore, and he proposed that as algebra travelled from Arabia to the Iberian Peninsula, X came to represent the unknown. He explained this by saying that the Spanish could not pronounce the sh sound. Let me explain. The Arabic word for unknown thing is something like sheon. It begins with sh. And the Spanish do not have the sh sound in their language. And so, by convention, they used he, the Greek letter, which is shaped like an X. Why they didn't translate the Arabic word for unknown thing to the Spanish word for unknown thing is unknown. But also, at this time, in the 10th to the 15th century, on the Iberian Peninsula, they were using the Old Spanish language. And the Old Spanish language did in fact have the sh sound. And by coincidence, it was represented by the letter X. So you could say that the letter X came to signify the unknown, not because the Spanish couldn't say the sh sound, but because they could. Now, sticking with numbers, X also signifies multiplication, 3 times X. We use it for dimension, 2 by 4. And of course, it's the Roman numeral for 10, which brings us to generation X. Now, this could be the unknown or the lost generation in America. But the X actually stands for 10, and it's supposed to signify the 10th generation of Americans since 1776. The significance of that date is lost on me a little. Now, the 20 Committee. This was set up by the MI5, British spies. It was set up during the Second World War to turn German spies into double agents. And the 20 of the 20 Committee was represented by the Roman numeral 20. That is XX, the double X, or as the spies would say, the double cross. Okay, now moving from spies to mince pies to Christmas. Who put the X in Christmas? Well, that in fact was a Roman emperor. It was Constantine I, who round about 310 AD, when he went into battle, he carried his banner before him. And this banner had a Christogram on it. And the Christogram was made up of the first 2 letters of Christos, which is Greek for the letter Christ, which is a translation from the Hebrew Messiah, and it means anointed. So, the X in Christmas is the first letter of Christos, Christ. Again, we have to go back to the Greeks to find out what X means. Now, we've said X is a symmetrical letter, both horizontally and vertically. It's a letter of a shadow of itself, a dichotomy. So not only can X signify Christ, but some oddballs have considered that X is associated with Satan. If you follow me here, it's the 24th letter of the alphabet. 24, 2 and 4. 2 and 4 equals 6. Hence, XXX equals 666. All right, that's a bit out there. Let's try and get a bit more to earth. Pirates. Pirates used the letter X to mark where they had hidden their treasure. We use the letter X to mark our affection, a kiss. And still, the letter X is used as a signature by those that cannot write. Teachers. We use the letter X to show that something is incorrect, is wrong. And ironically, we use the same letter to vote for our politicians. So, these negative connotations of X can be seen all around us. In the past, when we had typewriters, X's were used to delete the written part of text. An X certificate signified a film that could only be seen by people over the age of 18, another form of censorship. The X saying that this film contains explicit scenes. And today, XXX warns you of pornographic content. XXX on a jar tells you that there's strong liquor inside. X also tells us about drugs, ecstasy. And on a bottle, XX, poison. But as we said, X is a dichotomy. X can also mean abstinence. In punk culture in America, there was a band, Straight Edge, and when its followers went to see it, they were marked with an X on their hand, and this signified that they were not old enough to drink. And so this X evolved into elaborate tattoos, and it's supposed to represent abstinence from drugs and abstinence from alcohol. So again, this shadow X effect, it can be something good, it can be something bad. It can also show us about life and death. We mentioned the Tor, the mark that was on people's foreheads and on doors, and this was to save them. But on the other hand, it condemned others to death. If you look at a pyramid from above, it forms a perfect X, and the pyramid is the perfect symbol of death and life, even though it's the afterlife. The skull and crossbones, this signifies death to innocent seafarers. And if you see an X on a tree or a building, it means that it will soon be destroyed. The two X's on the eyes of a cartoon character mean it's already too late. And the X on your computer, that doesn't mean save, that means delete. Now, talking of deleting, the New York Sun in 2070 reported that the Commission for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice had passed an edict to ban the letter X. Now, this hasn't happened, but in the future, we could be watching reruns of Z-Files. We could be waiting for the new Z-Man film. We could be voting on Z-Factor. You could be waiting to buy your children the new Z-Box, or if you're more traditional, to play noughts and Zs with them. If you're unlucky, you might have to go to the hospital for a Z-ray. Or if you're luckier, you'll be marking a few Zs, blowing a few Zs to your loved one. And you could all be sitting here listening to a talk on the letter Z at a TEDz conference. Okay, so thank you for listening. If you've got any questions, please don't ask me. I'm as confused as you are. Thank you.